What if I told you that recently I had a nightmare so vivid that it inspired this very video? Let me explain. I was probably 14 or 15 years old and I was in a game store. Remember those things? Game stores?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
And I was about to buy a big new release. I don't know what the game was, but let's just say, for the sake of staying true to myself, it was the long-awaited Turok Evolution remake.
Let me see your face. You are the one from my dreams.
I was so excited, I picked the game off the shelf and took it to the counter, only to be denied by the man. He shook his head and pointed to the 18+ rating on the game, and I was forced to leave empty-handed. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart beating at 300 BPM, only to realise that it was just a dream. My days of being controlled and roadblocked by a little number on the box are, thankfully, long in the past. All of you watching who are my age know how much these little boxes used to dictate our lives back in the early 2000s. But it got me thinking, are video game age ratings kind of just pointless nowadays? During the initial rise and boom of gaming, age ratings were a big deal. The technology was rapidly advancing, and so graphics and sound design were quickly becoming more and more realistic. The line between reality and the virtual world was becoming more blurred with every new game, which was great for gamers and fans of this new age of entertainment, but fanned the already raging flames of anti-gaming sentiment. In the 90s and early 2000s, this sentiment was particularly prevalent, and that just so happened to be the time when games were really starting to advance. The move from 2D sprites, pixelated effects, jittery animations, and low-detail environments to fully fledged 3D experiences aimed at looking, sounding, and feeling as close to real life as possible sent those who already hated gaming for whatever reason into overdrive. And so age-restricting games based on their content became a major part of the industry, just as it had with movies and TV. This graphical advancement continued into the plateau we find ourselves in today, where games and their sometimes very gratuitous effects look no different to real life anymore. But to experience modern graphics, gore, and effects in all their finest glory, you need a powerful machine. And so, I've partnered up with Apex Gaming PCs to create my own line of PCs. Yes, HiddenXperia PCs. From the slightly lower end Pureform PC to the higher end Gravemind and Primordial builds, you'll be set to play the best and most real looking games with ease. And if you use my code HIDDEN, you get up to $250 off your next purchase. But back to the early 2000s, to the era of emo and edge. The era that I constantly wish I could go back to. The main reason that age restrictions were so strictly enforced during this era was because of the myth that video games had some significant effect on behaviour. Notably, that video games caused violence.
Shouldn't we also quit marketing murder as a game?
Chances are, when most of us were kids, our parents had some varying degree of belief in this stupid claim. Whether they only kinda half believed it because they heard it on the news once, or whether they were absolute devout believers that the sole reason our generation had so much pent-up violence and aggression supposedly in us was because of video games, doesn't matter. They all relied on these age ratings to dictate what and how we played. But needless to say, after 2 long decades of extensive studies, case studies, psychological research, and scientific research, no conclusive link between violent video games and violent behaviour has ever been found.
I don't believe it! They're retreating! We won!
Maybe it's just because I grew up during this time, but the idea of enforcing these age restrictions on games just really seems like a relic of a time when people took video game violence to be way more of a big deal than it actually is. From the age where video games caused violence and drug addictions, not from the age that we live in now where over 1/3 of all human beings on planet Earth actively play video games. And it's clear that it's not just me that thinks this. Depending on the study that you look at, up to 86% of parents actually ignore these ratings when choosing what games their kids can play. The age of the great video game scare is finally over, and I think both parents and game makers alike just care a whole lot less about the kind of content these games provide, because at the end of the day, both have the necessary intelligence to realize that they're just different forms of entertainment. Speaking of percentages, over 58% of you aren't subscribed. Now, I'm currently walking a lonely road. It's the only road that I've ever known, but unlike Green Day, I know where it goes. 1 million subscribers. So please, if you enjoy my content, then make sure you hit subscribe down below right now and help me towards that gargantuan goal. Now, before we go any further, I think I need to talk about the real reason why I'm making this video, because it might seem kind of out of left field and kind of a weird topic to make a video about, right? Yes, I do still have nightmares about my mum not letting me play Gears of War because it's an 18+ game and I'm only like 11. Yes, I still have nightmares about that, but there's a more recent reason. A few weeks ago, 343 Industries banned a Halo Infinite forger for making a map that was deemed too violent because it went beyond the game's T for teen rating. They even went as far as deleting his map, and so that got me thinking about how 343 dropped Halo down from an M for mature rating to a T for teen rating in pursuit of a larger and younger audience, and how much that attempt has failed. Much of Halo's tone and atmosphere was neutered, with almost no effect on popularity whatsoever, whilst other, more popular games just don't seem to really care about their age rating. There seems to be very little correlation between the age ratings of the biggest games on the market, and so it got me thinking, these age ratings really don't hold anywhere near as much weight as they used to in the early 2000s. Are they just a relic of an older era? With how online everything is nowadays, from the games themselves to the stores that you buy the games from, enforcing these restrictions is so much harder than it used to be, and I feel like developers and publishers are well aware of that. In place of the imposing man behind the counter at the game store, we have age gates, which at this point are just like laughably easy to get round. No longer do you have to try and convince the game store employee that you are in fact a 24-year-old male named McLovin from Hawaii to buy a game. Now, you just say that you were born a decade before World War I, and you're in. Of course, family settings can be applied to accounts to prevent them from playing certain games or buying certain games, but I feel like, at least for the most part nowadays, if you have the money and the means to play a game, getting a hold of it really isn't that hard. I mean, speaking personally, before I was 18, I was playing games that were a lot older and getting a hold of them very easily without anything really preventing me, and that was before gaming was as online as it is nowadays.
FBI, open up!
Back when age ratings were actually strictly enforced, or were meant to be strictly enforced at least, it was so much harder to get a game that was above your age. And realistically, when you think about it, how the hell can age ratings even be enforced in the online age? I mean, it's almost a meme now that the first thing you see when you open like literally any game imaginable is online experiences unrated by the ESRB. Online gaming is a no man's land of content. There's no possible way for any of its content to be given an accurate age rating because it's so dynamic, there's no predicting it.
Nice.
Happy.
What?
Fuck you.
Ah, you fell for it.
Fortnite, for example, may very well be a T for teen game, but there's nothing stopping you from loading into a quads game on your own and being put in a party of randoms who spend the entire game going into intricate detail about the gore in 28 Days Later, or reciting Samuel L. Jackson's iconic Snakes on a Plane monologue.
I have had it with these motherfucking snakes on this motherfucking plane.
I think with mostly online games, the age rating is more so meant to refer to the base foundations of the game, i.e. what's in the box, but in the era of live service and specifically franchise collaborations, even this seems fleeting because now how a game is when it's boxed up and put on a shelf to sell is often radically different to how the game is a year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. Seeing Fortnite doing collaborations with franchises like Dead Space and Gears of War that are just so counter to its family-friendly theme will never not be hilarious to me. The fact that nobody really seems to care that this T-rated game now has content in it from a game where you have to tear the limbs off twisted and malformed humans to put them down, or from a game that revolves around mincing people in half with an underslung chainsaw on your assault rifle, just shows how much less strict and enforced these age ratings are nowadays. Of course, you can make the argument that the content from Gears and Dead Space in Fortnite isn't exactly graphic, but when I can run around as Isaac Clarke with a bladed plasma cutter, or as Marcus Phoenix cutting people up with a locust butcher's cleaver, it's hard to say that sticking within the confines of the teen rating was exactly their utmost priority when making these skins. I just feel like in the early 2000s, stuff like this wouldn't have flown at all. It feels like back then you had to be so much more consciously aware of the age rating when making your game. And I think the reality of this is that most developers and publishers just kind of know that bending your game to a specific age rating isn't really necessary anymore for your game to be a huge success. Well, most developers and publishers at least. Gaming is such a normalized form of entertainment now. It's a pastime that over 2 billion people worldwide enjoy on the regular. It's not some fringe piece of satanic technology that has to be strictly categorized and controlled with a series of arbitrary limitations anymore. And when you look at the most popular games on the market and their respective age ratings, it's clear that there's not really that much of a correlation. Call of Duty and, by extension, Warzone, GTA, God of War, Last of Us, Red Dead, Rainbow Six Siege, Elden Ring, etc, etc. All games rated M for mature, and yet all games that in some capacity currently dominate or have dominated the industry in the last few years. Of course, not all the top games are rated this highly, but it's clear that it's not a requirement for a game to have a low age rating now for it to be massively popular. And I think this is honestly great for creativity. Had age ratings remained as important and controlled as they were in the early 2000s, I think the creativity of the industry would have been massively reduced. Publishers would ensure that every game tried to hit as low of an age rating as it could to ensure that its potential player base, and thus the amount of people that they could monetize, would remain as large as possible. I mean, that's just business, right? And that's why it confuses me when I see Halo being twisted and contorted to hit that T for teen rating, which it hasn't been benefited by at all, whilst COD has remained very much M for mature. If anything, it's kind of gotten more M for mature over the years, and has only really continued to grow. And I mean, if having a low age rating was such a big deal for the financial success of a game, you know that Activision, of all the publishers, Activision would have absolutely been on that. They would have been forcing COD to be an E for everyone game from the get-go, but they haven't been. It's stayed M for mature. With all this said though, age ratings definitely aren't entirely pointless. They absolutely serve a purpose still, and they always will do. They provide a rough idea for what kind of content a game has so that parents can make valued judgments on what they're buying for their kids. Not to say that they're always particularly accurate though. In fact, actually, funny story about inaccurate age ratings, right? So, when I was young, like early 2000s, my mum had gone out to buy me a new game for my Xbox for my birthday, right? And she knew that I loved dinosaurs, so she was in a game store going over the shelves, and she saw this game, Turok Evolution. And she saw it, she knew that I loved dinosaurs, and she thought it's just a game where, like, you hunt dinosaurs or something. And she looked at the age rating, and for some reason, it had been misprinted to a 3+ game, so the game was fit for anybody who was aged 3+ and over. So she bought the game for me, gave it to me on my birthday, and I loved it. Started playing it, and of course she sat there and she watched me play it. And then, needless to say, when she saw me decapitating slag troopers with the bow and hacking their limbs off with the war club, she wasn't particularly happy. Either way though, Turok Evolution went on to become one of my favourite games of all time. Sadly, this is not my original copy. I don't know where my original one is, but this bad boy is one of my favourite games of all time. Just a very funny story as to how I first played it that kind of fits in with this video. Where was I going with this? Oh yeah, age ratings may be impossible to enforce nowadays. They may be ignored by a staggeringly high percentage of people and have become almost obsolete as technology and society have evolved, but they will always serve somewhat of a purpose. It's probably not advisable to have little Timmy's first game be a game like this, where you can shoot the cerebral ball into someone's spine and it pops all of their limbs off one by one as blood spurts out of the holes. Probably not best. I just think it's really interesting comparing these age ratings nowadays to how they were 20 years ago, because I think it's kind of a great way to see how radically the sentiments towards gaming in society have shifted. Games that were infamous for having ratings and graphic content so bad that they were even banned in certain countries, like Manhunt for example, are like insanely tame by today's standards, even by the standards of some of the biggest and most popular games on the market, and nobody really bats an eye. Games far more graphic than Manhunt are freely advertised just about everywhere, from console dashboards to TVs and even billboards out in public. Despite their mature content, they're ingrained into society and aren't hidden away behind a black and white box on the cover. Maybe I've just gone full boomer though. I'm 20-something now, we don't talk about the specifics. Maybe I've gone full boomer. Maybe the only reason that these age ratings seem pointless to me now is because they don't affect me like they used to. No more not being allowed to play Predator Concrete Jungle because it's an 18+ game that allows me to pull spinal cords out of people. Another true story there. But seeing how Halo has withdrawn itself from any mature tone and has shed elements of its design to chase an audience that just doesn't exist, combined with the ever-increasing online-only state of the industry, has made me adamant that these ratings just don't mean what they used to. Boomers, millennials, and fellow Zoomers. Yes, believe it or not, by some definitions, I am technically a Zoomer. Once you've left your thoughts on the fleeting purpose of age ratings in games down below in the comments, click up here to go and see why I think Battle Royale is about to be replaced. Thank you all very much for hitting subscribe, because I know you have done by now, surely. And I want to give a massive thank you to all of my amazing patrons for the continued support over there as per usual, and thank you all so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll catch you all in the next one.